What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. Another week, another round of Apple software releases, and in this episode, we're going to discuss the latest with iOS 15.5, along with the other updates, and discuss what to expect in the coming weeks and months, because we're getting very close to the most exciting time of the year. But anyways, after we discuss the software side of things, we're going to discuss why the iPhone 14 might cost less than we expected, the upcoming M3 iMac, Apple's self-service repair program, an iOS 16 feature that might be enabled by default, and more. And if you guys want to stay updated with all things Apple, make sure to click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss next weekend's episode. All right, so as always, let's go ahead and start off with the latest software update from Apple, which is iOS 15.5 Beta 3. Now, this is mainly a bug fix update. The first two beta releases had a few changes on the front end, but beta 3 just has a lot of back-end code changes. So the first thing I want to talk about is inside of the TV application, and specifically relating to Friday Night Baseball and Sports Kit. So Apple continues to make tweaks to Sports Kit, and they've just added things in beta 3 like showing the strike count, showing the runners on base, and also the option to jump around the stream and even watch from the beginning. So just minor changes related to Friday Night Baseball, but it is getting a lot better since it first launched a couple weeks ago. And I always have people asking me after every single beta update if there's a new wallpaper, but there is no new wallpaper in 15.5. And at this point, it's looking like we're gonna have to wait until iOS 16 before we get a new wallpaper, which is unfortunate. Now, I did also want to talk about AirPlay because a lot of you guys have complained to me about AirPlay being really bad, especially when it comes to AirPlaying to your TV or AirPlaying to a HomePod. And I've had the issue with the HomePod for a long time now, but I will say it is a little bit better here in 15.5. It's been like that really since the first beta, and beta 3 is just as good. So I'm able to connect to my HomePods rather quickly. It's still not instant. I still wish it was faster. Same with the Q. The Q still doesn't pull up right away. It's a little bit slow and a little bit laggy. Same with changing songs, but it is a little bit faster than it was on previous versions of iOS 15, which is nice. Now, I've also had some messages from you guys about iCloud Private Relay being especially spotty here in beta 3. So I personally keep this feature turned off just because it does hinder my connection speeds. It makes my phone just slower overall, so I turn it off, especially since I'm on, my own private Wi-Fi most of the time. But the reason I bring this up is because we're hearing that this could be enabled by default in iOS 16. So Digiday reported that several sources are saying that Apple is planning new features for iOS 16 to further crack down on tracking user data. And one of these sources said, quote, "I believe that Apple will announce that customers love Private Relay and that it's been such a success that they're going to make it an always-on feature for in-app behavior." And then another source said, "I think it's probably going to be similar to what they did with Private Relay and move ahead with the obstruction of the IP address in iOS 16. So that is pretty interesting. This is not really something we've heard leaked before, but this is coming from some sources who have some inside information about iOS 16 and just Apple as a whole. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually happens with iOS 16. I hope it doesn't, honestly, just because I like the fact that we have the option to turn that on or off if we want to. I don't like when Apple does things just, and doesn't give us the option to turn it off. So yeah, beta 3 as a whole is pretty much just much ado about nothing. There's really not too much going on with this third beta. It's really all just back-end code changes, just little minor verbiage changes and bug fixes. Really nothing we can see on the front end that's going to change our life. So let's move on to talk about the performance and battery life, because both of those have actually been really good here in 15.5 ever since beta 1. So performance is about the same as it's been since beta 1. There's really no point in me running a Geekbench test every single time. It's about the same as it was in beta 3, or in beta 1 rather. And battery life, I will say, has improved since beta 1. So I mentioned to you guys that battery life was not the best in beta 1. It got a little bit better in beta 2, but now with beta 3, I think it's pretty much right on par with iOS 15.4.1, which is the latest public release, and that's saying something. And I say that's saying something because we're not even on the final version yet. We're not even on the RC yet. We still have a G at the end of the build number, and the battery life is pretty much just as good as it was on the latest final release. So that bodes well for 15.5 when it releases to the public, which it should. I mean, we're this late into the iOS 15 cycle. We're gearing up for iOS 16, so we would expect nothing less, but it's still nice to see. And speaking of what's next, let's go ahead and talk about what to expect next from Apple. So next up is going to be iOS 15.5 Beta 4, and that's going to go into May. So I can't believe this year is flying by so fast. It's already almost May, and I would expect Beta 4 to come most likely on May 3rd. So we are now back on a weekly schedule, and Apple has loved those Tuesday releases, so I can see Beta 4 coming on Tuesday, May 3rd. And if that's the case, we'll probably see a Beta 5 the following week, and then an RC the following week, and then the final on the week of May 23rd. That is my prediction right now. Of course, we'll have to wait and see what the build number is with Beta 4 to see if we're even going to see another beta after that, but that is my impression so far. That is my prediction so far. And then we could also see a 15.4.2 released before iOS 15.5, but of course that will depend on what comes next week, depending on that build number in there, because we could see 15.5 a little bit earlier, maybe the week of the 16th, if it's like an A at the end of the build number or something like that. So we'll have to wait and see. I do think a 15.4.2 is still likely though. And then of course down here on June 6th is when we'll see iOS 16 Beta 1. All right, so now let's move on to the fun part. Let's talk about the latest Apple leaks and rumors from this past week. So let's start off with some big iPhone 14 news, courtesy of Mark Gurman. So in his latest Power On newsletter, he gave us a lot of information about what to expect with this year's iPhones. He starts by confirming that the overall design will be the same as the iPhone 12 and 13 with the flat edges, but now with a new notch on the Pro models. He says, quote, "That notch will include a pill-shaped cutout for Face ID and a circular cutout for the camera. That will be Apple's solution until it's able to fully embed Face ID and the front-facing camera into the display itself. That's still at least 3 to 4 years away." And then he goes on to further confirm the rumor that we've been seeing for quite a while now, that there's going to be a 14 Max this year. Not a 14 Pro Max, a 14 Max. So that lineup is going to look like this: a 6.1-inch iPhone 14, 6.7-inch iPhone 14 Max, 6.1-inch iPhone 14 Pro, and 6.7-inch iPhone 14 Pro Max. So for the first time ever, we're going to have a non-Pro 6.7-inch iPhone. And the best part, you're going to be able to get this iPhone for at least $200 less than you could before, since beforehand you needed to go with the Pro Max to get that 6.7-inch size. So that is excellent news, since I know a lot of you guys love the biggest iPhone you could possibly get. But of course, this raises the question, how is Apple going to differentiate the Pro models from the regular iPhone 14? Well, Gurman shares some insight here as well by saying that in addition to the things we already had in the 13, we can also expect the Pro models to have a 48 megapixel sensor for the main wide-angle camera compared to 12 megapixels on the non-Pro models. And also, the new A16 chip is going to be on the Pros, while the non-Pro models stick to the A15 chip. So going from 12 megapixels to 48 megapixels is a pretty large jump, but as I always say, the megapixels don't really matter that much in iPhones and just, smartphone photography. It's more about the internals and what that chip can do for post-image processing. So we'll have to wait and see if it's really as big of a difference as it seems on paper, because I'm willing to bet it's probably not. And then he also mentions that Apple is still working on the satellite connectivity feature, which would allow you to report emergencies and make emergency texts when you have no cell service. And I think there's a good chance we're actually going to see that this year. And then speaking of the iPhone 14, we also just got our best leak yet regarding the look of these phones. So this image was posted on Baidu and it seems to be legit. So it shows the iPhone 14 lineup and one of our first looks at what the pill cutout will actually look like compared to the rest of the lineup and that notch. And I have to say, I actually love how this looks. Now we'll have to wait for more leaks to come out, but as of now, this is pretty much what we can expect the front of these iPhone 14s to look like. So now let's move on to the iMac, because in addition to all the new Macs that are coming with the M2 chip, Apple is already planning a new iMac with an M3 chip inside. Gurman said, quote, "If you're waiting for a new iMac, I'm hearing an M3 version of that desktop is already in the works, though I imagine it won't launch until the end of 2023 at the earliest. Also, for those asking, I still think an iMac Pro is coming, it just won't be anytime soon." So it's interesting to hear about the M3 chip, but perhaps more interesting is that Gurman still believes an iMac Pro is coming. So we'll have to wait and see if that ever happens, but a lot of people say it's not coming, but Gurman is doubling down here and saying that it's definitely coming at some point, just not soon. Apple also finally announced their self-service repair program after announcing that last year. So this was highly anticipated, and this is going to allow you to repair your iPhone 12, 13, or SE3 at home which will obviously save money and time and going in there and making an appointment. So Apple's press release says this, quote, "The new online store offers more than 200 individual parts and tools, enabling customers who are experienced with the complexities of repairing electronic devices to complete repairs on the iPhone 12, 13, and SE, such as the display, battery, and camera. Later this year, the program will also include manuals, parts, and tools to perform repairs on Mac computers with Apple Silicon." And while everything sounds good and dandy, there is a little bit of a catch, as mentioned by iFixit. They said this, "Integrating a serial number check into their checkout process is a dire omen and could allow Apple the power to block even more repairs in the future. Building the technology to provision individual repairs easily sets Apple up as the gateway to approve or deny any repairs in the future with parts from any source." So that is pretty interesting, and I can see where iFixit is coming from. And of course, iFixit is the #1 source for pretty much fixing smartphones. And let me just be clear, iFixit and everybody else pretty much is optimistic about this program. They're not saying anything bad about it. They're just saying there is a little bit of a catch. It's not overall a bad thing. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for Apple and the whole right to repair movement. And then finally, we need to talk about Qualcomm's rival to the M1 chip because it's coming next year. So the chip that's going to be in their 2023 computers is going to be a Nuvia design processor that will directly compete with Apple's M1 chips. And if you don't know about Nuvia, it's a chip startup company that was founded by ex-Apple chip designers and was acquired by Qualcomm last year. So if anybody knows how to beat Apple, and make something more powerful, it's going to be people who worked for Apple before. So this will be very interesting to watch because I think that by the time these release, Apple's already going to be on to M2 and maybe even M3, and I just think those chips are going to simply outperform these Qualcomm chips. But time will tell, who knows? And always competition is a great thing because it means Apple's going to have to keep innovating and keep making these chips faster year over year to stay on top. If they want to stay on top, they're going to have to keep innovating. So I like to see competition. I hope it's actually, remotely close to faster than M1. That's all I can say. But there you have it, guys. That is the latest batch of Apple news from this past week, along with some additional information on the boring iOS 15.5 Beta 3. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss next weekend's episode, along with my iOS 16 coverage, which is coming at the beginning of June. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.